When my mom was in junior high, she went to a sleepover at her friend Holly's house with a group of other girls. The house had a spacious basement where they planned to spend the night, complete with an old television, a stack of board games, and a pile of snacks to keep a bunch of teenage girls happy. It was summer, so the chilly air in the basement felt refreshing, a welcome escape from the heat outside. Toward the back of the basement, a row of full-length mirrors lined the wall, their reflective surfaces gleaming faintly in the dim light. This detail would become significant later. The evening started out fun. Mom and her friends gorged on snacks and played games, everything from Holly's board games to classic sleepover staples like Truth or Dare. They laughed and carried on, unsupervised by Holly's parents, who had popped in briefly to say goodnight before leaving the girls to their fun. As the night grew late, the group started to wind down, growing bored with their games and ready to crawl into their sleeping bags. But Holly wasn't ready to call it a night. She suggested they try something different, a Ouija board. The idea sparked excitement, and the girls agreed, gathering in a circle near the mirrors at the back of the basement. Before I go further, I should mention something about Holly's friend Amy. She had her own brush with the supernatural before this night, which she'd shared with my mom. When Amy was younger, her family had visited a lake out of state. As darkness fell, and they prepared to head back to their campsite, Amy saw something strange, the ghostly image of a carriage sinking into the middle of the lake. As she watched, a massive, shadowy figure emerged from the water, a tall, expressionless man wearing a hat. Amy said she was so terrified she could barely move, but something in her mind screamed that she had to leave, or something terrible would happen. She fled and never saw the shadow man again. It might seem like a random detail, but it ties in later. So there they were, Mom, Holly, Amy, and the other girls, sitting in a circle with a Ouija board in the center. Since Amy was the only one with any kind of supernatural experience, Holly asked her to lead the session and open the circle. Amy began, inviting any spirits to join them. For a while, nothing much happened. The planchette moved sluggishly, if at all, and the girls were about to give up and close the circle when it suddenly jolted to life, sliding rapidly across the board. The group buzzed with excitement. Mom, caught up in the moment, joined in, firing off questions. Who are you? What's your name? Where are you from? How old are you? The planchette darted aimlessly at first, but then it began to spell out something clear, Ozio Zozo. The moment the name appeared, Mom felt a heavy, creeping dread settle over her. It was like a dark, oppressive energy had entered the room, something cold and malevolent. She wanted to stop, to close the circle right then, but Holly and the others didn't seem to notice, or didn't care. They were too caught up in the thrill, eager to keep asking questions about this Zozo. They might have kept going if Amy hadn't suddenly screamed and yanked her hand away from the board, pointing at the mirror behind Mom's shoulder. Mom was too terrified to turn and look. At the same time, the basement lights flickered wildly. Mom tried to dismiss it as faulty wiring in an old house, a foolish assumption, she later admitted. After a tense moment, the lights steadied, but Amy was shaking uncontrollably, clearly rattled by whatever she'd seen. Before anyone could do anything, Amy lunged forward, closed the circle, and snatched the Ouija board, shoving it away. Mom felt a wave of relief wash over her, but the dark, oppressive energy still lingered, pressing down on her like a weight. It was a mistake to ignore it, but she tried to push it aside. Holly, on the other hand, was furious. She snapped at Amy, demanding to know why she'd ended the session. "Now we won't have any fun," Holly complained, insisting they'd probably never get to talk to anyone on the other side again. Amy, still trembling, apologized but insisted that playing with the Ouija board was a bad idea and that it was getting late anyway. Holly started to argue, but no one backed her up, so she dropped it. The girls grabbed their sleeping bags, and Amy turned off the lights before slipping into her own bag next to Mom's. As the others drifted off to sleep, Mom lay awake, the eerie feeling still clinging to her. Just as she was about to doze off, she heard Amy whisper, her voice raspy and shaking, "Serena, are you awake?" Thinking Amy just wanted to chat, Mom rolled over, propping herself up on one elbow to face her friend in the darkness. "Yeah, what's up?" she asked. Amy's voice was barely audible. "You felt it too, didn't you? That dark presence." Mom wasn't sure exactly what she'd felt, but she knew it wasn't good. She nodded. Oh yeah. I was afraid I was the only one. Amy's next words sent chills through her, a memory that still haunts her to this day. I saw something in the mirror, Serena. Something sinister. It was this huge shadow, and I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was staring right at me. I could feel its eyes, and it was sitting right behind you. A cold dread crawled up Mom's spine, like an icy hand gripping her. She didn't know how to respond, and she sensed Amy didn't expect her to say anything anyway. Eventually, exhaustion pulled Mom into sleep, but it wasn't restful. She was plagued by violent, vivid nightmares, the kind that left her heart pounding even in her dreams. Sometime in the middle of the night, she jolted awake, though she couldn't pinpoint why. As she lay there, drowsy and trying to drift back to sleep, a chilling certainty hit her. Something was watching her. The basement, already cool, felt unnaturally freezing now, far colder than it should have been. Panic crept in, but Mom tried to calm herself, reasoning that it was just the basement's chill and her paranoia from Amy's words. She told herself it was nothing, another foolish mistake, and forced herself back to sleep. Morning came, and the group gathered upstairs for breakfast with Holly's family. In the bright daylight, Mom's fear faded, replaced by the normalcy of chatter and clinking dishes. Nothing seemed out of place anymore. After breakfast, she packed her things, said her goodbyes, and started the mile-long walk home. The trek was uneventful, the summer air warm and ordinary. When she got home, she dropped her stuff in her room and headed to the living room, where her sister Nicole was hanging out. They started chatting, and Mom casually mentioned the Ouija board and how they talked to something called Zozo. Nicole's reaction was immediate and intense. She freaked out, calling Mom stupid for messing with a Ouija board and warning her that Zozo was a demon. "You better not have brought it back here," she snapped. Mom insisted she hadn't, but doubt gnawed at her. Later, as Mom went to her room to grab something, she froze. A dark shadow moved swiftly from one side of her room to the other. Heart racing, she charged in, half expecting it to be a prank, but no one was there. Instead, an overpowering stench hit her, rotten eggs, decay, and something sickly like vomit. The room felt colder than ice, and a wave of absolute dread washed over her, pinning her in place. Then, from the corner, came a low, menacing laughter. She turned and saw the shadow again, watching her in broad daylight. Terror took over, and Mom bolted from the room, screaming. She and Nicole ran outside, where another argument erupted. Nicole, determined to investigate, searched the trailer for the shadow. She returned 30 minutes later, saying the only trace left was the lingering smell of rotten eggs, nothing else. Surprisingly, Mom never encountered that demon again after that day, and that's where her story ends. But there's a connection to me. Remember Amy's shadow man with the hat? And how Mom's Ouija board experience might tie to my own paranormal encounters. Well, years later, I started seeing the same figure Amy described, and maybe the same one that followed Mom home. I began seeing the Shadow Hatman in my freshman year of high school, and that's a story of its own. The eerie connection between my mom's Ouija board experience and my own paranormal encounters started to unravel when I was in my freshman year of high school. That's when I began seeing the Shadow Hatman, a dark, sinister figure that might have been the same entity my mom's friend Amy saw years ago at the lake, and possibly the same presence that followed Mom home after her sleepover. It's hard to say for sure, but the fear it brought into my life was undeniable, and it haunted me for years. It all began when I was around 14, lying in bed late at night or in the early hours of the morning. I'd wake up suddenly, gripped by an overwhelming wave of panic and anxiety that seemed to come out of nowhere. My body felt heavy, my limbs sluggish, like I was pinned down by an invisible weight. I've always been paranoid about what might be lurking in the dark, so I slept with the covers pulled over my head, a habit I still have. It was as if some part of me knew that opening my eyes might reveal something terrifying. And I was right to be afraid. The Shadow Hatman would appear in the corners of my bedroom, a tall, featureless figure, wearing what looked like a wide-brimmed hat. He never hurt me physically, but his presence was suffocating. He'd just stand there, watching me for what felt like hours, his gaze heavy with malice. Sometimes, if I managed to drift back to sleep, he'd invade my dreams, looming in the background or standing too close, his silent menace filling me with dread. There were nights when he'd get bolder, standing at the foot of my bed, so close I could feel the evil radiating off him, like a cold, dark energy that made my skin crawl. Those moments were the worst, leaving me frozen, heart pounding, too scared to move or even breathe too loudly. This went on throughout high school, from my freshman year all the way to my senior year. Over those 4 years, his appearances became less frequent but more specific, almost as if he was choosing his moments carefully. I was grateful for the reprieve, but it didn't make the encounters any less terrifying. One incident stands out above the rest, and it still makes my stomach churn to think about it. It happened during my junior year in a science class where we were working on a project. The teacher had turned off the lights and blacked out the windows to create a dark environment for the experiment, something about observing chemical reactions under controlled conditions. The room was pitch black, save for the faint glow of our equipment. As I worked, that familiar wave of panic hit me, sudden and intense, like a punch to the chest. I couldn't breathe properly, and my body felt like it was locked in place. I glanced around, my eyes straining in the darkness, and there he was, the Shadow Hatman. He was in every corner I looked at, his silhouette unmistakable, that hat tilted slightly, his form darker than the already dim room. No matter where I turned my gaze, he was there, watching, unyielding. I was convinced I was going to die right there in that classroom, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. I couldn't move, couldn't call out, couldn't do anything but sit there, trapped in his presence. When the teacher finally flipped the lights back on and the windows were uncovered, the Hatman vanished, as if he'd never been there. Relief flooded through me, so intensely I nearly cried from joy. I hoped, prayed, that was the last time I'd ever see him. For a while, it seemed like it might be. The sightings tapered off, and by my senior year, I could almost convince myself it was over. But then, about a year ago, I went camping with my boyfriend at the time, now my ex, and a group of our friends. I'd never been camping before, and despite being on my period and getting swarmed by bugs, I was excited for the adventure. The campsite was lively, with a lake nearby gently lapping at the shore, crickets chirping, and the crackle of our campfire creating a cozy atmosphere. We laughed and shared stories during the day, and I felt safe surrounded by friends. But as night fell, everything changed. The campsite had a small bathroom about a 2-minute hike uphill, split into sections for men and women. It was grimy, reeking of feces, urine, and vomit, but I had to use it frequently because of my period. Around twilight, with just a sliver of light left on the horizon, I decided to make one last trip to the bathroom to change my pad before settling in for the night. For context, in American camping culture, these kinds of basic outdoor restrooms are common at public campsites, often poorly maintained but functional. I told my boyfriend, Joseph, I'd be back in a moment and started the short walk up the hill. At first, everything seemed normal. The crickets sang, birds chirped their evening songs, and I could hear other campers laughing and talking in the distance. The lake's gentle waves and the faint crackle of our fire soothed any unease I might have felt about walking alone in the growing dark. But then, that familiar panic surged through me, sudden and paralyzing. The sound of the campsite, the crickets, the birds, the voices, faded to an eerie silence. Even the lake seemed as still. My heart raced as I recognized the feeling, the same dread that always came with him. I heard it then, low, menacing laughter, the same chilling sound I'd heard years ago in my mom's story. Frantically, I scanned the darkness, my eyes darting for any sign of him, ready to bolt back to Joseph and the others. That's when I saw him. The Shadow Hatman stood several yards away at the top of the hill, where the path split into an intersection leading to more campgrounds to the left or the main road to the right, about a 15-minute drive away. The bathroom was between us, and my camp was a minute back, hidden behind parked cars and towering oak trees. I knew no one from my group could see me unless they walked up to the road, and screaming would likely be useless. Whatever he was, he'd probably act before help could arrive. I froze, my body trembling as I whispered, "What do you want?" My voice was barely audible, shaking with fear. The Hatman didn't respond, but the malevolence pouring off him was answer enough. He stood motionless, his featureless form radiating an intent that felt nothing short of evil. As the last light of twilight faded, his laughter grew louder, a sound that seemed to echo inside my skull. I was on the verge of tears, every muscle tensed, waiting for him to strike. Time dragged on, each second stretching into an eternity. I was about to throw caution to the wind and run when he raised one long, thin, claw-like hand, and then, just like that, he vanished. The world snapped back to life. The crickets resumed their song, the birds chirped, and the distant laughter of campers filled the air again. The lake's gentle waves returned, as if nothing had happened. I bolted to the bathroom, my stomach churning. I barely made it inside before I vomited violently, the fear overwhelming me. I sank to the floor and cried for a good 10 minutes, shaking uncontrollably. Eventually, I pulled myself together, took care of my period needs, applied hand sanitizer, and hurried back to the campsite. The rest of the trip, I was on edge, constantly expecting the Hatman to return, maybe this time to do more than just watch. But nothing else happened. That was the last time I saw him, and I pray it stays that way. For years ago, I broke up with an abusive ex, Joseph, but he hasn't stopped posting about me online since. I know it might sound like I'm being full of myself, assuming his vague posts are about me, but hear me out. When I showed the posts to friends, they went from skeptical to suggesting I get a restraining order. This isn't just in my head, it's real, and it's been messing with my life ever since. I met Joseph when I was 16, and he was 22, the older brother of my best friend. Young and naive, I missed a lot of red flags when we started dating. He tried to talk me out of a summer school program that would have covered full tuition at my top choice university, saying I'd be gone for 2 months and would probably mess up college anyway. He wouldn't let me hang out with my friends, claiming they were bad influences. He even controlled where I went, to the point that I wasn't allowed to attend my own high school graduation party because he was paranoid I'd cheat on him. Instead, he took me to Chili's and spent the evening trying to convince me to skip college altogether, all while calling me a dumb jerk. Looking back, it's clear he was deeply insecure, but at the time, I didn't see the full extent of it. Our relationship didn't survive my first semester of college. Once I started college, Joseph's control escalated. He demanded I text him every 30 minutes, and if I didn't, he'd call and yell at me. I had to phone him as soon as I got back to my dorm each day, and stay on the line until he went to bed, often keeping me up so late I could barely finish my homework. He visited twice when my roommate was away, and even though I splurged on tickets to see WWE Live and the Lumineers, events I thought he'd enjoy, he complained the whole time about how awful the city was. Later, he asked me to send him $70 for tickets to see Brand New in New York. I refused because I was broke, having used money from my parents' care packages to buy him the other tickets. He called me a selfish jerk who didn't care about him. That was the breaking point. I decided I'd leave him the next chance I got. I waited for a day when he was in a good mood, then called to end it. Surprisingly, he was calm, saying it was okay, but insisting we both agree not to date anyone for a month and stay in touch during that time. Exhausted and just wanting it to be over, I agreed, even though I knew it was a bad idea to let a controlling guy 3 hours away dictate my life. Almost immediately, I realized how ridiculous it was and started flirting with a guy from a student organization. It didn't go anywhere. I was too shaken and lacked confidence, but I didn't hide my interest, commenting sweet things on his Facebook posts and tagging him in memes. Part of me wanted Joseph to see it, to know he couldn't control me anymore. And he did see it. He freaked out, saying I'd violated our agreement and that our relationship clearly meant nothing to me. He started stalking the other guy's Facebook, demanding details about him and threatening to come up and kill him. I gave a half-hearted apology, backed off from the guy, and laid low until the month was up. When the month ended, I sent Joseph a message saying I'd kept my end of the deal and to never contact me again. Whatever he'd been planning during that month didn't work out because he snapped. He threatened to come to my city and murder me, saying he'd burn my university to the ground and beat me to death. He'd made physical threats before when I wanted to go out, but never this extreme. Terrified, I blocked his number and all his social media accounts. I didn't go to the police, fear held me back, but I told people back home I'd reported him and shared his threatening messages, hoping word would get back to him. Joseph was scared of cops, so I figured it might deter him. It seemed to work, and things were quiet for about a year. During that year, I started therapy for complex post-traumatic stress disorder, got a job, moved into my own place, and began enjoying college life. But I was still hyper-vigilant, always checking for his car or his friends when I went out. Eventually, friends convinced me to relax a bit. My therapist insisted I stop checking his social media, and I agreed. Another year passed, and then I started getting strange friend requests on Facebook from Joseph's sister's ex-boyfriend, his aunt, and a random girl from our old high school. I deleted and blocked them all, assuming he was trying to snoop on my profile. Curious, I made a dummy Facebook account to check his page, looking for any signs he was planning to come to my city. Most of his posts were generic, complaints about being lonely or hating single life, but some mentioned how controlling I'd been during our relationship. His friends had posted shortly after our breakup, mocking my hair, my decision to go to college, and calling me names. It was aggravating, but not alarming. Then I found his Tumblr, and it was much worse. For 2 years, he'd been posting vile rants about feminazis, saying women who party deserve to be raped and killed, and spewing misogynistic garbage. Feminism had been a sore spot when we dated, so I wasn't sure if he was targeting me specifically or if his views had just gotten more extreme after we split. But some posts were unmistakably about me. He wrote about still listening to my favorite songs, posted a long confession about being an abusive jerk in his last relationship and wanting to improve, and shared lyrics from mixtapes he'd made me, tagged with #R or #Lamelectus. I was freaked out and showed the posts to my roommate, the same one from freshman year. She told me not to worry and to stop looking at his stuff. My boyfriend at the time said the same, pointing out that Joseph was too broke to act on any threats. They both urged me to move on and ignore him, so I tried. 2 more years went by, and I'd occasionally get friend requests from people connected to Joseph, which I deleted and blocked. My fiancé and close friends got some too, and I told him to do the same. I created an Instagram account but had to make it private after his friends and suspicious fake accounts started following me. I received creepy messages from empty accounts asking for my address or to meet up somewhere, bizarre and unsettling. The messages stopped around May of last year, but as graduation approached, I got worried again. If Joseph was going to act on his threats, it would be now or never. I was getting married in April, and while the wedding was low-key and private, graduation was a public event at a downtown convention center, with all the details online for anyone to see. A week before the ceremony, a high school friend messaged me on Facebook, saying Joseph had written a song about me and sent a link. I thought she might be reading too much into vague lyrics, but I logged into my dummy account to listen. The song was undeniably about me, referencing specific details from my Facebook, like how I'd bought a car for graduation, my husband and I had recently purchased one, and how I was married now and moving to a fancy apartment, which was true since we'd upgraded after our old place flooded. The lyrics also mentioned things we used to do together, like driving back roads and smoking cigars. I was deeply unsettled but didn't know what to do. I messaged another contact from back home to ask if they'd heard anything, and they said they no longer talked to Joseph's group but doubted he had the guts or means to do anything. The next day, I went back to listen to the song again for clues, but it was gone. Joseph had uploaded a new one with vaguer lyrics about making love on a couch, nothing specific. A few days later, he posted a photo of an empty street at night with no caption. I drove myself crazy trying to figure out if it was in my city, but I couldn't tell. I considered skipping graduation. Being first generation, I knew my parents would be devastated, but the arena had security guards and metal detectors, so I decided to risk it. I spent the morning anxious, running through emergency scenarios in my head, just like when we first broke up. I couldn't fully enjoy the ceremony, dull as it was, and my family was upset that I seemed distant and moody. I didn't tell them why. I knew they'd call me irrational. The day came and went, and nothing happened. It's been a month now, and I've had no friend requests, no weird posts, nothing. I deleted my old Facebook and made a new one under a fake name with no photos, just to stay in touch with my support network. But I'm frustrated that I'm back to obsessively checking Joseph's profile to see if he's planning something, making me feel like the creepy one. Maybe that's what he wanted all along, to stress me out and make me look crazy. I'm questioning my own judgment, unsure if I have the right to be scared. I don't know how he's getting info about my life, and I suspect one of my two high school friends might be feeding him details. I feel irrational and paranoid, unable to fully enjoy the positive changes in my life, my marriage, my new apartment, because I'm always on guard, waiting for him to strike. In that sense, he's still winning. I used to frequent a pub in Glasgow, a gritty spot packed with bikers and heavy metal fans, where I'd sit with a book, soaking in the loud music and the buzz of people around me. I'm an antisocial sort, happy to be around others, but not big on chit-chat. The pub's vibe suited me perfectly, dark, noisy, and full of characters who didn't care if I kept to myself. After a few drinks, I'd often head to a nearby nightclub to keep the night going. But there was this one guy who stood out like a sore thumb. Pale blue jeans, crisp white shirt, totally out of place among the leather jackets and band tees. He didn't fit, and he wouldn't leave me alone. This white shirt guy kept trying to get my attention. Whenever I looked up from my book, he'd nod at me, like we had some unspoken connection. When I went to the bar, he'd offer to buy me a drink, which I'd brush off with a polite but firm, "Sorry, not interested." A few times, he even plopped down at my table, trying to start a conversation despite my obvious disinterest. In American terms, think of a guy who looks like he wandered out of a preppy frat party into a dive bar full of rough-around-the-edges types. He was that kind of mismatch. My rejections didn't seem to register, and it started to grate on me. One night, I decided to dress up a bit, feeling good and wanting to shake things up. I wore a sharp outfit, something that made me stand out more than usual. White shirt guy was there, as persistent as ever, trying to catch my eye every chance he got. I ignored him and made my way to the nightclub after the pub, a three-story place packed with people dancing and drinking. For context, Glasgow's nightlife is vibrant, with clubs like this one drawing big crowds, similar to popular venues in American cities like Chicago or Austin. I gave my usual nod to the bouncers. They all knew me as a regular, and headed to the entrance to pay the cover. As I reached for my wallet, an arm in a white shirt shot past me, and he said, "Two. We're together." I spun around, annoyed, and said, "No, actually, just one for me, please, Kate," to the cashier, brushing him off before heading inside. All night, he trailed me like a shadow. No matter where I went in that crowded club, up to the second floor, down to the dance floor, weaving through the sea of people, he was there, always a few steps behind, trying to get my attention. It was beyond irritating. It was creepy. At one point, I left my drink with a friend to use the restroom, thinking nothing of it. For Americans, it's worth noting that in busy UK clubs, it's common to leave your drink with someone you trust or on the bar for a quick moment, though it's risky anywhere. My friend later admitted he'd set my drink on the bar for a bit while I was gone. That's when things took a turn. I started feeling off, really off. My head spun, my body felt hot and sweaty, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. At first, I thought I was coming down with something, maybe a sudden flu. I decided to call it a night and head home. I don't remember stumbling down the club stairs, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was outside, and white shirt guy was following me. The bouncer, a guy named Al who knew me from my days running pubs, stopped him at the door. White shirt tried to claim I'd had too much to drink and needed help, but Dal wasn't having it. He knew I could handle my liquor. Working in pubs, you learn your limits, and could tell I wasn't drunk, just ill. Dal pinned the guy against the wall, giving me a chance to slip away, though I was barely aware of it at the time. Somehow, I ended up wandering into the red light district, a sketchy area just one street behind the club. In Glasgow, red light districts are known for being rough, much like certain urban areas in the US where crime and solicitation are common at night. I was completely disoriented. My skirt was torn, my shoes, coat, and bag were gone, and I was stumbling along in a daze. 3 hours later, a friend who drove a cab spotted me walking toward the main road near my home. He recognized my tattoos from behind and pulled over to check on me. Seeing my state, he knew something was wrong. He got me into his car and called a nearby hospital, letting them know he was bringing me in. 3 days later, I was coherent enough to piece together what had happened. My drink had been spiked with ketamine, a dangerous dose that could have been lethal. For Americans, ketamine is a drug sometimes used recreationally, but is more commonly known as a veterinary anesthetic or, in medical settings, a sedative. It's not something you mess around with. My cab driver friend talked to Dal, the bouncer, and they figured out that white shirt guy was the culprit. Word spread, and some of the cab driver's friends tracked him down and gave him a beating. Later, a group of railway workers, tough guys who hung out at the pub, heard about it and gave him another thrashing. He was barred from both the club and the pub, and I stayed away from those places for a long time after that. The ordeal shook me to my core. I didn't go out much for a while, too rattled to face crowded places or trust my surroundings. The memory of that night still lingers, especially because it wasn't the end of creepy encounters in my life. My father, who's been a source of his own kind of creepiness, recently tried to re-enter my life, stirring up those old feelings of unease. That's a different story, but it's why I'm sharing this now. His attempt to reconnect brought back memories of moments like this one, where someone's persistence crossed into something far darker. My parents divorced when I was 7, and I'm the oldest of 4 siblings, 2 younger sisters and a younger brother. I'm 28 now, and none of us have spoken to our father in about 6 or 7 years. He recently tried to reach out, but we all refused to engage. His attempt stirred up old memories of his creepy behavior, some of which I've shared before, like how his family used to watch us sleep when we visited them, a habit that went on for years and still baffles us. I also mentioned once how his mother tried to kidnap me from school after the divorce. I meant to share more about our family's disturbing experiences, but life got in the way. Now, with his latest attempt to reconnect, I'm ready to lay it all out. At his worst, my father was a mentally unstable abuser. At his best, a deadbeat dad who barely showed up. After the divorce, we saw him less, and because of court papers limiting his access, his physical abuse tapered off. But what replaced it was something creepier, a shift in behavior that left us uneasy. He started doing things like walking in on me and my siblings while we were showering or changing. He'd pick the lock, barge in, and claim he needed to ask us something trivial, like what we wanted for dinner or if we wanted to visit our grandparents. These were questions that could have waited until we were dressed or been asked through a closed door. It felt invasive, deliberate. As young kids, my siblings and I were close, and we'd often change or shower together to avoid being alone with him. It was our way of protecting each other, a silent agreement born from discomfort. As we got older, we learned to keep him out, locking doors more carefully, staying vigilant. But he adapted, finding new ways to make us uncomfortable. When my younger brother was 4, Dad would rub his inner thigh while commenting on how much he looked like our mother, his voice tinged with something unsettling. When my younger sister, around 8 or 9, went up to accept an award at a school ceremony, Dad slapped her on the "but" as she passed, a gesture that left her mortified. These moments became disturbingly normal, woven into the fabric of our sporadic visits. He'd also torment our mom, filing court claims that she was keeping us from us, when in reality, he was the one who often failed to show up to pick us up. When I was 15, we got a call from my father's stepdad, our grandpa, that Dad was missing. This was news to us, since we hadn't heard from him in about 3 years. Grandpa claimed Dad talked about us all the time, which seemed odd given his absence. 2 weeks later, Mom picked us up early from school with an update, her face grim. She drove us 4 hours to an aunt's house, and we sensed something serious was happening. When we arrived, she told us the truth. Dad hadn't been found by the cops. Grandpa had found him. He'd been camping half a mile from our house, his car loaded with hunting equipment. Rifles, knives, the works. In his possession were photos of me and Mom, our faces scratched out, and he'd been muttering about how to kill us. Grandpa, horrified, removed Dad's car and weapons, then called Mom to warn her. He also tipped off the police anonymously, leading them to pick up Dad outside shop, where he was ranch shouting about someone stealing his hunting bow set and shotgun. The weapons weren't registered, so the cops didn't know if they'd existed or if it was all in his head. The police took him in, and months later, he was released with a handful of psychiatric medications he never took. Somehow, the court still allowed him continued visitation rights. Over the next few years, his visits were even more erratic, but he kept filing false reports claiming Mom was blocking him from him. One day, when my brother was 14, Dad showed up at his middle school, trying to pull him out of class to take him to see a prostitute. My brother refused, and Dad lost it, causing a scene and attempting to fistfight him. Campus police stepped in, and when questioned, Dad blamed me, saying my brother didn't respect him because I'd poisoned him against him. He was escorted off campus and banned from returning. After that, we didn't hear from him for a couple of years. Then he resurfaced, demanding visitation again, which the court still permitted. By then, I was over 18 and didn't have to see him. I was staying at a friend's house when he showed up and Mom offered to call me, but he dismissed it saying, "Don't bother." He took my 3 siblings to see our grandparents, where he spent the visit berating them and bad-mouthing Mom and me. My younger sister stood up to him, backed by our other siblings, and he cut the visit short, returning them to Mom. He told her I'd turned them against him, refusing to take responsibility for his actions. Time passed, and life moved on. When I was 22, we got word that his mother was dying. We said our goodbyes, attended her funeral, and went back to our lives, school, jobs, growing up. I got married, and he didn't send so much as a card. My sisters graduated college, and he didn't show up. My brother finished high school, and not even a phone call. But just last week, out of the blue, 3 of us, me, my brother, and 1 sister, got Facebook messages from him. None of us have him blocked, but we don't have him added either. My brother's message read, "Daddy loves you. My life's been really hard. I try to always be there for you and do what's best. It's your mother who's always stopped me. She and your older sister hate me. Please talk to me so I can tell you about my life." My sister got a similar message, asking about her life but echoing the same self-pitying tone. My message was different. He said he'd stayed away because of me, claiming I deprived him of my siblings, but he still loved me and wanted to share his life story. He reminded me that the family broke up because of me, and my marriage was mentioned dismissively. "Oh yeah, you got married." My life is terrible. You need to message me so I can tell you about it. When we told Mom, she mentioned getting a call from an out-of-state number where Dad lives but didn't answer because she was out. She hadn't realized it was him until we brought it up. She checked the voicemail, and it was chilling, heavy breathing, then him saying her name, and my siblings' names, followed by more breathing until machine cut off. For Americans, this kind of cryptic, unsettling voicemail might evoke the kind of creepy calls you'd see in a thriller movie, amplifying the sense of dread. We all agreed we were done with his creepiness. I've been putting off sharing this because it's heavy, but I can't stop thinking about it. His actions have left scars, and his recent attempt to worm his way back only deepens the unease he's always brought into our lives. Last Friday, I went to my cousin's apartment complex to babysit my baby cousin and his older sister. It was early, around 9 a.m., and I was sitting cross-legged on the living room carpet, eating a breakfast sandwich I'd picked up on the way. The kids were still asleep, so I had the place to myself, the TV humming softly in the background with some morning show. The apartment was cozy, filled with the usual clutter of a family with young kids, toys scattered here and there, a stack of board books on the coffee table. Everything felt calm, normal, until something happened that shook me to my core. Out of nowhere, one of the kitchen cabinets in front of me slowly creaked open. Just a single cabinet, its doors swinging out as if nudged by an invisible hand. I froze, my sandwich halfway to my mouth, staring at it. I've had odd things happen at my own place before, scratches appearing on my arms, the TV turning off by itself, my bed covers yanked off me in the middle of the night. I've always chalked those up to explainable causes, like my cat or my imagination, because I never actually saw them happen. But this was different. The cabinet opened right in front of my eyes in broad daylight, in an apartment where I'd never had any weird experiences before. My first thought was, what the heck? It's way too early for this nonsense. Trying not to freak out, I stayed still, hoping maybe I'd imagine it, or there was a simple explanation. I didn't want to give whatever it was, if it was anything, the satisfaction of seeing me react. I finished my sandwich, chewing slowly, my eyes locked on the cabinet. Once I was done, I decided to investigate. I got up, intending to check if something inside had shifted to push the door open, but before I could take a step, the baby monitor on the coffee table started beeping wildly, flashing a low battery warning. For Americans, baby monitors are common gadgets in households with infants, used to listen or watch for sounds from the nursery. This one was a familiar model I'd used dozens of times while babysitting, and it had never acted up like this. I grabbed it, plugged it into its charger since the baby was still asleep, and returned my attention to the cabinet. I opened it fully, peering inside. Nothing unusual, just a jumble of books, some old cookbooks, and random kitchen junk like spare utensils and a dusty box of tea bags. I checked the hinges, wondering if they were loose, but the cabinet had a child safety lock, the kind that requires a firm tug to open. I tested it, closing the door and trying to pull it back open. It wouldn't budge without serious effort, far more than a gentle push could manage. My unease grew, a knot tightening in my stomach. This wasn't a loose hinge or a draft. Something had opened that door. Shaking it off, I went to throw away my sandwich wrapper and settle back on the couch, turning up the TV to drown out my nerves. But then the baby monitor went haywire again, screeching with static and beeping in a way I'd never heard before. My heart leapt into my throat. I knew monitors could pick up stray frequencies, maybe a neighbor's device or a radio signal, but the timing felt too coincidental, coming right after the cabinet incident. Panic surged through me, and I couldn't hold it together anymore. I grabbed my phone and texted my friends, my fingers trembling as I described what had happened. They told me to call my mom, so I did, my voice shaky as I explained everything. While I was on the phone, the monitor finally stopped its chaotic noise, but instead of relief, a wave of overwhelming fear crashed over me. I started sobbing, tears streaming down my face, my chest heaving. I don't usually cry over stuff like this. I try to stay rational to not feed into creepy moments, but this was different. It felt like the fear wasn't entirely mine, like something was pressing it into me, heavy and suffocating. I cried for a solid 10 minutes, barely able to explain to my mom why I was so upset. It was as if the terror was disproportionate, like losing someone I loved, though nothing that extreme had happened. Finally, I calmed down enough to check on the kids. I tiptoed to their rooms, my heart still racing, and found them both sleeping peacefully, their soft breathing the only sound. The baby was curled up in his crib, his tiny hands clutching a stuffed animal, and his sister was sprawled across her bed, oblivious to everything. Seeing them safe grounded me a little, and nothing else happened after that. The rest of the day passed without incident, and I tried to push the morning's events out of my mind, focusing on playing with the kids once they woke up and keeping things normal. But ever since that day, I've been on edge whenever I babysit at that apartment. I haven't told my cousin or her husband about what happened. I don't want to freak them out or make them think I'm losing it. I just hope, with every fiber of my being, that it never happens again. The memory of that cabinet creaking open, the monitor's frantic beeping, and that inexplicable flood of fear lingers, making me dread being alone in that space. I keep wondering if it's connected to the minor weirdness at my own place, or if it's something new, something tied to that apartment. Either way, it's left me rattled, and I'm not sure I'll ever feel completely at ease there again. It was 2012, and I had just started college, moving into my dorm a couple of weeks before classes began because of band camp. By the time the semester kicked off, I was already comfortable in my room, a small space typical of American college dorms, 2 twin beds, a couple of desks, and a shared bathroom tucked just inside the door. My roommate moved in a few days before classes started. She was nice enough, but we didn't talk much. She spent most evenings out with her friends, often coming back late, while I was usually wiped out from band practice and heavy course load. I wasn't much for nightlife, so I rarely stayed out past 10 p.m. A few weeks into the semester, though, something happened that shook me to my core, something I still can't fully explain. I just gone to bed, my roommate's still out somewhere, probably at a party or with her friends. I've always had a touch of insomnia, undiagnosed, but it takes me forever to fall asleep. On a good night, it's half an hour, but usually it's 1 to 2 hours. I've tried everything. Warm milk, counting sheep, meditation apps, but nothing helps much. That night, I was lying in bed, running through a little story I've used since I was a kid to calm my mind, a kind of mental movie I play to lull myself to sleep. That's when I heard a key in the door. It didn't startle me. I figured it was my roommate coming back. Through my closed eyelids, I saw a red glow as the door opened, letting in light from the hallway, then darkness again as it shut. I heard the lock click and the familiar sound of her footsteps, light but distinct, crossing the room to the bathroom. A minute or two later, she came out, but instead of walking past my bed to her own on the other side of the room, she stopped. My bed was right in front of the bathroom door, so her pausing there was odd but not alarming. I thought maybe she was checking a text, or her sleeve had caught on something, or she was shaking a pebble out of her shoe while leaning against the doorframe. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to sleep, continuing my mental story. She stood there for about 30 seconds, silent, and I started to wonder what she was doing. Then she moved, not toward her bed, but toward mine. Her footsteps were different now, slower, deliberate, almost like a shuffle. One foot slid across the floor, then another, each sound creeping closer to my bed. She stopped at the foot of my bed, and my heart began to race. I forced myself to keep breathing slowly, evenly, still pretending to be asleep. After a few seconds, I felt the mattress dip as she sat down at the foot of my bed. The blanket shifted, pulling slightly, and my feet tilted toward her, my ankles resting against her back. This was definitely weird. Why would my roommate, who I barely knew, sit on my bed in the middle of the night? My pulse quickened, but I stayed still, hoping she'd get up and go to her own bed. Then I felt her move again, but not away. She inched up the bed, her body sliding closer to mine, slow and deliberate. I could feel the warmth of her body now, the mattress creaking faintly under her weight. Her face came so close to mine I could feel her breath on my cheek, hot and steady. My heart was pounding, so hard I was sure she could hear it. Something was wrong, really wrong. Beyond the obvious creepiness of a near stranger hovering over me in the dark, there was a detail that made my blood run cold. She was still sitting at the foot of my bed. My ankles were still pressed against her back, which was now angled slightly toward my head. Yet somehow her face was inches from mine, close enough for her breath to graze my skin. Whatever this was, it wasn't my roommate. The realization hit me like a punch, and terror flooded every inch of my body. I struggled to keep my breathing even, my face relaxed, but it was nearly impossible. I could feel my expression wanting to twist into a grimace of fear. The thing, because I was convinced it wasn't human, stayed there, hovering over me, its breath slow and labored, unlike any normal person's. It felt heavy, not just in weight but in presence, like it was pressing down on the air itself. Its arms were braced on the bed, close enough to graze me, supporting its weight as it leaned in. I knew, somehow, that it wanted me to open my eyes to look at it. It had to know I was awake. My heart was hammering, my body tense despite my best efforts. But I fought to keep my eyes shut, some instinct screaming that looking would be a mistake, that seeing it would make things worse. For what felt like hours, it lingered, its breath hot on my face, its presence suffocating. Finally, after an eternity, it moved. Slowly, deliberately, it lifted itself off the bed. Its arms pulled away, the mattress shifting as its weight eased. It straightened, my feet rocking back to their original position as it stood. Then came the shuffling again, slow and methodical, moving away from my bed. It crossed the room to the door, and I heard the lock click open. A red glow filtered through my eyelids as the door opened, then faded as it closed and locked again. I lay there, shaking, too terrified to move or open my eyes for at least half an hour. My mind raced, trying to convince myself it was gone. Eventually, exhaustion and a fragile sense of safety let me open my eyes. The room was empty, my roommate's bed untouched. I was alone. I don't know how I fell back asleep that night, probably sheer exhaustion from the adrenaline crash. When I woke up the next morning, my roommate still hadn't returned. Later that day, I asked if she'd come back to the dorm at all, and she said she hadn't. She'd stayed out with friends, crashing at someone's place. I was stunned, but didn't tell her what happened. I couldn't bring myself to explain it, not when I didn't understand it myself. This wasn't like anything I'd experienced before. I've had minor paranormal moments, hearing party sounds through my bedroom door at night when no one was there, seeing a dark figure flash at the foot of my bed, catching footsteps outside in the middle of the day when I was alone. Those felt fleeting, almost dismissible. But this was different. It was real, tangible, and sinister, like it fed off my fear. The first thing that came to mind later was something like the Slender Man, a fictional internet horror figure I'd seen in YouTube videos like Marble Hornets, years before the Slender Man game became a thing. I knew Slender Man wasn't real, but the comparison stuck because of the tall, shadowy presence. For Americans, Slender Man is a well-known creepypasta, a modern urban legend born online, but this felt far more immediate than a story. I ruled out my roommate playing a prank. She'd have needed an accomplice, one person to sit at my feet, another to lean over my face, and I would have heard extra movement. The dorm's floors were creaky, the walls brick, and the only sounds were the quiet hum of a mini fridge and a low rumbling air conditioner. If someone dropped a cotton ball, you'd hear it. There's no way two people could have pulled it off without making noise. I also don't think it was sleep paralysis. I never tried to move, so I didn't feel paralyzed, just terrified. I was awake, alert, feeling every shift of the mattress, every breath on my face. If anyone has ideas about what this was, I'm open to suggestions, because I still don't know, and it haunts me to this day. Last night, my 12-year-old half-brother Jake messaged me out of the blue, scared out of his mind. He lives with his dad in a small town in Texas, a place with wide-open spaces and houses spread far apart, not the kind of bustling neighborhood where you'd expect random visitors late night. For context, in rural American towns like this, it's common for homes to be isolated, with long driveways and few streetlights, making nighttime disturbances especially unsettling. Jake's dad works odd hours, sometimes leaving him alone for stretches, which isn't unusual in their household but always makes me worry. Around 10:30 p.m., Jake reached out via Google Hangouts, his messages frantic, saying someone or something was pounding on their front door. I was at home miles away, winding down for the night when my phone pinged with his first message. There's someone banging on the door and Dad's not here. My stomach dropped. Jake's a tough kid, not prone to panicking over nothing, so I knew this was serious. I immediately started typing back, trying to keep him calm. Okay, Jake, stay cool. Where are you in the house? Are the doors locked? He replied that he was in his bedroom, the doors were locked, but the pounding was so loud it echoed through the house. He said it wasn't a normal knock, it was heavy, relentless, like someone was slamming their fists or a blunt object against the wood. The way he described it sent chills down my spine. It's like they're trying to break the door down. I asked if he looked out a window to see who it was, and he said no, he was too scared. Smart move, I thought. Don't go near the windows, I told him. Stay in your room, keep the door locked, and turn off your lights so no one knows you're there. He said he'd already done that, huddled in the dark with his phone, the only light coming from the screen. He added that their dog, a scrappy little terrier named Max, was going berserk, barking and growling at the door, which only made the situation feel more urgent. I could almost hear the chaos through his words, the dog's frantic yaps, the booming thuds shaking the house. Trying to think straight, I asked if he'd called his dad. Jake said he tried, but it went straight to voicemail, which wasn't unusual since his dad's job often took him to areas with spotty cell service. What about Uncle Mike? I asked, referring to their uncle who lived about 20 minutes away. Jake hadn't thought to call him, so I told him to do it right away, but to keep me on Hangouts so I could stay with him. He sent a quick message to Uncle Mike explaining what was happening, and I kept typing to keep Jake focused. You're doing great, buddy. Just stay put and keep quiet. Mike's gonna come check it out, okay? I was trying to sound calm, but my heart was racing, imagining my little brother alone in that house with something menacing outside. While we waited, Jake kept updating me. The pounding hadn't stopped. It was steady, almost rhythmic, like whatever was out there wasn't in a hurry but wasn't giving up either. He said it felt wrong, not like a drunk neighbor or a lost delivery guy. It's creepy, he typed. Like it knows I'm here. That sent another shiver through me. I didn't want to scare him more, so I said, it's probably just some jerk messing around. Mike's on his way, and he'll handle it. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. The way Jake described it reminded me of stories I'd heard about things that weren't quite human, things that lingered with bad intentions. About 10 minutes later, Jake said Uncle Mike had texted back, he was on his way, and had called the police, who were also heading to the house. I breathed a sigh of relief but stayed on the line, keeping Jake talking to distract him. Tell me about that new video game you got. I said, hoping to pull his mind away from the noise. He started typing about some zombie shooter he'd been playing, but his messages were short, clipped, like he was still listening to the pounding. Every few seconds he'd add, "It's still going," or "Max won't stop barking." I kept up the chatter, asking about his high score, anything to keep him grounded. Then suddenly, Jake typed. It stopped. The pounding had cut off mid-thud, like someone had flipped a switch. Max was still barking, but Jake said it was quieter now, more confused than aggressive. "That's good," I said, trying to sound optimistic. Maybe they gave up and left, but something about the abrupt silence felt worse than the noise. I asked if he heard anything else: footsteps, voices, a car engine. He said no, just the dog and the usual night sounds outside, like crickets and the faint hum of a distant highway. I told him to stay put until Mike and the cops got there, just in case. Uncle Mike arrived about 15 minutes later, his truck rumbling up the driveway. Jake peeked through his bedroom blinds and saw the headlights, then typed, "Mike's here." I see his truck. I told him to wait until Mike knocked and called his name before opening the door. A minute later, Jake said Mike was inside, checking the house. The police showed up shortly after, their flashlights sweeping the yard. Jake stayed in his room until Mike came to get him, saying it was safe. I stayed on Hangouts the whole time, my hand shaking as I typed, waiting for an update. When Jake finally got back to me, he said Mike and the cops had found nothing. No footprints, no tire tracks, no signs of anyone around the house. The front door was intact, no scratches or dents, which was weird given how hard Jake said the pounding was. The cops figured it might have been a prank or someone who got spooked and ran off, but Jake wasn't convinced. He said the way it stopped right before help arrived felt too deliberate, like whatever was new to vanish. Mike agreed it was strange, especially since Max had been so worked up but calmed down the moment the pounding stopped. For Americans, dogs are often seen as reliable alarms for danger, so a dog's intense reaction like this carries weight in stories of the unexplained. Jake was shaken but safe, and Mike stayed the night to keep an eye on him. Their dad got home a few hours later, oblivious to everything until Mike filled him in. Jake didn't want to talk about it anymore that night. He just said, "Thanks for staying with me," and logged off to try to sleep. I couldn't sleep, though. I kept thinking about what he described, that heavy, rhythmic pounding, and the way it cut off so suddenly. It felt like whatever was out there had bad intentions, like it was testing the door, maybe waiting for Jake to make a mistake and open it. I'm just glad I was there to keep him calm until help arrived, and I hope he never has to go through something like that again. My grandparents' house in Traverse City, Michigan, has always felt off, like there's something lingering in the air that doesn't belong. It's a charming old place, the kind you'd see in a postcard of small-town America. 2 stories, wraparound porch, nestled among tall pines with a view of Grand Traverse Bay in the distance. For Americans, Traverse City is known for its scenic beauty, cherry festivals, and cozy Midwestern vibe, but this house has a darker side. My mom first noticed it back in 2005, when she was staying there to help care for my grandpa after a surgery. She was in her early 30s then, and her experiences were so unsettling that she swore she'd never spend a night there alone again. Mom told me she started hearing things almost immediately after settling in. Late at night, when the house was quiet, she'd hear footsteps pacing the hallway outside her room on the 2nd floor. They were heavy, deliberate, like someone wearing boots, not the soft shuffle of my grandparents. At first, she thought it might be Grandpa getting up for water, but when she checked, he and Grandma were fast asleep in their bedroom downstairs. The footsteps didn't stop there. Sometimes they'd move up the creaky staircase, pause at the top, and then fade away, only to start again later. She also heard voices, faint, muffled, like a conversation happening just out of earshot. She couldn't make out words, but the tone felt urgent, almost angry. Once while lying in bed, she heard what sounded like a child giggling right outside her door, which chilled her to the bone since no kids were in the house. Mom tried to brush it off, telling herself it was an old house with settling floorboards or her imagination running wild from stress. But the disturbances kept happening, night after night. She'd wake up to the sound of something heavy being dragged across the attic floor above her room, followed by a single loud thud, like a piece of furniture being dropped. When she checked the attic the next morning, everything was in place. Dusty boxes, old trunks, nothing disturbed. The final straw came one night when she felt a presence in her room. She was half asleep when the air grew heavy, like someone was standing over her bed, watching. She didn't open her eyes, too scared to confirm what she felt. But the sensation was so intense she barely slept that night. After Grandpa recovered, she left and vowed to avoid staying there alone. Years later, when I was in my late teens, I started spending more time at the house to help my grandparents with chores as they got older. I heard Mom's stories but didn't think much of them. Old houses are creepy, right? I was there for a week one summer, sleeping in the same upstairs bedroom Mom had used. The first few nights were fine, just the usual sounds of an old house, creaking wood, the hum of the fridge downstairs. But then I started noticing things. One night, I was reading in bed when I heard footsteps in the hallway, just like Mom described, slow, heavy, like someone pacing back and forth. I figured it was Grandpa, who sometimes wandered at night, so I called out, "Grandpa, you okay?" No answer. The footsteps stopped for a moment, then started again, closer to my door. My heart raced, but I stayed quiet, hoping it would pass. Eventually, they faded away. The next night, I saw something that made my blood run cold. I was lying in bed, scrolling on my phone, when I caught movement in the corner of my eye. Near the closet, a tall, shadowy figure stood motionless. It was vague, more like a smudge of darkness than a clear shape, but it felt alive, like it was watching me. I froze, my phone still glowing in my hands, too scared to move or look away. The air in the room felt thick, oppressive, like it was pressing down on my chest. After what felt like forever, the figure seemed to dissolve, blending back into the shadows. I didn't sleep much that night, keeping the bedside lamp on until morning. When I told my grandparents about it the next day, they exchanged a look but didn't say much. Grandma just said, "This house has its quirks," and changed the subject. The scariest incident happened a few nights later, around 2 a.m. I was asleep when a massive boom jolted me awake, like something huge had crashed in the house. My first thought was that a tree had fallen through the roof. It was that loud. I sat up, heart pounding, listening for any follow-up sounds, like debris or my grandparents calling out. Nothing. Just silence, thick and unnatural. Then from the back porch downstairs came a series of sharp taps on the glass sliding door. Tap, 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 slow and deliberate, like someone knocking to be let in. For Americans, glass sliding doors are common in suburban homes, often leading to a backyard or porch, and the idea of something tapping on one in the dead of night is straight out of a horror movie. I was paralyzed, clutching my blanket, trying to convince myself it was a branch or an animal. But the taps were too rhythmic, too intentional. I stayed in bed, too terrified to move, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom, who was staying in the guest room downstairs that night to help with Grandma's medication. Her message read, "Did you hear that? The boom and the tapping." My stomach dropped. She'd heard it too, at the exact same time. I texted back, "Yeah, what was it?" She replied, "I don't know, but I'm staying put." "You okay?" I said I was, but I wasn't. Knowing Mom heard it made it real, not just my imagination. We both stayed awake, texting back and forth, too scared to check the house. The tapping stopped after a few minutes, and no more booms followed, but neither of us slept much. In the morning, we checked the porch and the rest of the house. Nothing was out of place. No fallen branches, no signs of damage, no explanation for the noise. When we told Grandma and Grandpa, they didn't seem surprised. Grandpa said, "This place has always had its noises," and left it at that. Grandma was quieter, just nodding, but I caught a flicker of unease in her eyes. Later, Mom and I compared notes. She said the tapping sounded exactly like what she'd heard years ago, though back then it was on a window, not the glass door. She also mentioned feeling that same heavy presence again that night, like something was in the house with us. We both agreed it wasn't just an old house settling. Something was there, something that didn't want us to feel at ease. Since then, I've been hesitant to stay at the house for long. I still visit to help my grandparents, but I avoid sleeping there if I can. Mom's the same. She'll drop by during the day, but won't spend the night unless she has to. We've never figured out what's causing it. My grandparents don't talk about it much, either because they're used to it or don't want to scare us. But the footsteps, the voices, the shadow, that boom, and those taps, they're burned into my memory. Whatever's in that house, it's been there a long time. It doesn't seem to be leaving anytime soon. A few weeks ago, I went to stay at my friend's house in Virginia to take care of her cat while she was out of town. Her place is a cute, single-story home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place you'd expect to see families with kids riding bikes or neighbors chatting over fences. For Americans, these types of neighborhoods are common in smaller cities, with well-kept lawns and a sense of safety. My friend had left detailed instructions for feeding her cat, a fluffy tabby named Luna, and keeping the house tidy. I was looking forward to a low-key week, just me, Luna, and some Netflix binges. But what started as a simple favor turned into something far more unsettling. I arrived on a sunny afternoon, pulling into the driveway with my overnight bag. The front door was locked, as expected, and I used the key hidden under a flower pot to let myself in. Luna greeted me right away, weaving between my legs and purring, happy for company. The house felt warm and lived in, with my friend's eclectic decor, colorful throw pillows, framed art, and a cozy rug in the living room. I dropped my bag in the guest room, fed Luna, and settled in, thinking everything was off to a great start. That evening, I noticed the front door was slightly ajar. I was sure I'd locked it after coming in, but I figured maybe I'd been distracted by Luna or hadn't turned the deadbolt all the way. I locked it securely and didn't think much of it, chalking it up to my own forgetfulness. The next morning, I woke up to a strange sight. The living room window was shattered, glass shards scattered across the floor, glinting in the sunlight streaming through the jagged hole. My heart sank. I grabbed my phone, ready to call my friend, and carefully stepped around a glass to inspect the damage. The window frame was intact, but the break was clean, like someone had smashed it deliberately. I checked the rest of the house, my pulse racing, expecting to find something stolen, a TV, jewelry, anything valuable. But everything was in place. Luna was unbothered, lounging on a couch like nothing had happened. I called my friend, who was understandably freaked out, and she told me to call the police. I did, and while waiting for them to arrive, I swept up the glass and taped a piece of cardboard over the window to keep the place secure. The police came by an hour later, 2 officers who took photos of the window and asked if anything was missing. I told them nothing seemed to be gone, but the unlocked door from the night before was weighing on me. They checked the doors and other windows, noting no signs of forced entry anywhere else. They said it was likely a random act of vandalism, maybe a rock thrown by a passerby or a kid messing around. They filed a report, gave me a case number, and suggested I keep an eye out for anything else unusual. After they left, I called a repair company to fix the window, which they scheduled for the next day. I tried to settle back into my routine, feeding Luna and watching TV, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house didn't feel as safe anymore, and I kept checking the locks obsessively. That night, I double-checked every door and made sure the cardboard on the window was secure before heading to bed. I fell asleep with Luna curled up next to me, her soft purring a small comfort. The next morning, I woke up to a faint dripping sound. At first, I thought it might be rain, but the sky outside was clear. I followed the noise to the bathroom, my bare feet padding across the hardwood floor. When I opened the door, I was hit with a wave of panic. The bathtub was overflowing, water spilling over the rim and pooling on the floor, soaking the bath mat and seeping into the hallway. The faucet was on full blast, and the drain was plugged, like someone had set it up to flood the room. I rushed to turn off the water, my hands shaking, and yanked out the plug. The water level dropped slowly, leaving a slick mess behind. I stood there, staring at the damage, my mind racing. The tub hadn't been running when I went to bed. I was sure of it. I'd used the bathroom before turning in, and everything was dry. I grabbed towels from the linen closet and started mopping up the water, trying to limit the damage. The hardwood in the hallway was already starting to warp, and I knew this was going to be costly. I called my friend again, my voice trembling as I explained what had happened. She was furious and worried, saying she'd cut her trip short and come home early. I also called the police again, who sent an officer out to take another report. This time, they were more thorough, checking the bathroom and the rest of the house for signs of an intruder. The officer, a woman with a calm demeanor, noticed something I'd missed. The back door's deadbolt was unlocked. I was certain I'd locked it the night before, just like the front door. She suggested someone might have entered the house while I was asleep, though there were no footprints or other signs of a break-in. She asked if my friend had any enemies, maybe an ex or a disgruntled neighbor. I mentioned that my friend had recently gone through a messy breakup with her ex-boyfriend, a guy who'd been possessive and hadn't taken the split well. The officer nodded, jotting it down, and said they'd look into it. They confirmed nothing was stolen, which made the whole thing even stranger. Why break a window and flood a tub without taking anything? After the police left, I called a plumber to check the tub and a contractor to assess the water damage. The plumber said the faucet and drain were fine, no mechanical issues that could have caused the overflow. The contractor estimated the repairs would cost thousands, especially for the hardwood floors. I felt awful, like I'd let my friend down, even though I knew I couldn't have prevented it. When my friend got home the next day, she was upset but didn't blame me. We went over everything together, and she was convinced her ex was behind it. He'd made vague threats after their breakup, saying he'd make her regret it, but she hadn't taken them seriously until now. She gave the police his name and contact info, and they said they'd follow up. The rest of my stay was tense. I kept Luna close, checking the locks and windows constantly, jumping at every creak in the house. My friend filed an insurance claim for the damage, and the police eventually confirmed her ex was a suspect, though they didn't have enough evidence to charge him. He'd been seen in the neighborhood around the time of the incidents, which was enough to make us both uneasy. My friend got a restraining order and installed a security system, hoping it would deter him. I finished my cat-sitting duties and went home, relieved to be out of there, but shaken by the experience. The thought of someone sneaking into the house while I slept, turning on a tub to cause chaos, still gives me chills. I just hope my friend's ex stays away for good, and that her home feels safe again someday. I work as support staff for adults with developmental disabilities, helping them navigate daily life, everything from grocery shopping to doctor's appointments. It's rewarding work, though it can be demanding, especially when family dynamics get complicated. One of my clients, Jeffrey, is a sweet guy in his late 20s who lives in a group home in a mid-size American city, the kind of place with strip malls and quiet residential streets. For Americans, group homes are common for adults with disabilities, offering a balance of independence and support. Jeffrey's family is mostly uninvolved, except for his older sister, Sally, who's become a growing problem. What started as occasional overstepping turned into something far more disturbing, culminating in a terrifying incident at my apartment. Sally first reached out to me about a year ago through Jeffrey's personal email, asking about his care. As a staff member, I'm used to coordinating with families, so I replied politely, sharing general info about Jeffrey's routine while keeping things professional. I made it clear she should go through our agency's case manager for detailed updates or visits, as per policy. At first, she seemed fine with that, thanking me for my response and saying she just wanted to stay in the loop since she lived a few hours away. But soon, her emails started coming more frequently, 2 or 3 a week, then daily. They shifted from questions about Jeffrey to personal stuff, like asking about my weekend plans or commenting on my profile picture, which she found on the agency's staff page. It felt odd, but I brushed it off, assuming she was just overly friendly. Then she started messaging me through Jeffrey's Facebook account, which he rarely used but had set up with staff help to connect with friends. The messages were clearly from Sally. Her tone was different, more direct, and she'd sign off with her name. She'd write things like, "Jeffrey's doing great, thanks to you. What's your favorite thing to do after work?" Or, "I bet you're amazing at your job. Tell me about yourself." I'd respond minimally, redirecting to Jeffrey's care or suggesting she contact the case manager. But the messages kept coming, sometimes late at night, and they got weirder. She'd send photos of Jeffrey with captions like, "Look how happy he is because of you," even though the pictures were old, taken before I started working with him. It was unsettling, like she was trying to create a connection that didn't exist. I brought it up with my supervisor, who said it wasn't uncommon for family members to fixate on staff, especially if they felt disconnected from their loved one's care. She advised me to keep responses professional and document everything, which I did. I also told Sally, gently but firmly, that I could only discuss Jeffrey's care through official channels. For a while, the messages slowed down, and I thought maybe she'd gotten the hint. But then they picked up again, more intense. She'd write long paragraphs about how I was special to Jeffrey, how she felt like she knew me, even though we'd never met. She started mentioning details about my life, my car model, the coffee shop I frequented near the group home, the fact that I live alone. I hadn't shared any of this with her, and it sent a chill down my spine. For Americans, this kind of personal intrusion feels like a violation, like someone's been watching you without your knowledge. I checked my social media, which was mostly private, but I realized she could have pieced things together from Jeffrey's posts or casual conversations he might have overheard at the group home. I locked down my accounts, varied my routine, and told my coworkers to be cautious about sharing info. I also reported it to my supervisor again, who contacted Sally's family to address her behavior. Her parents apologized, saying Sally had a history of obsessive tendencies and had done something similar with a teacher when she was younger. They promised to talk to her, and for a couple of months, things were quiet. I started to relax, thinking it was over. Then, about 3 weeks ago, I came home from a late shift around 10 p.m. to find my apartment window smashed. I live in a ground floor unit in a small complex, typical for young professionals in American cities, affordable but not exactly high security. The window was in the living room, facing the parking lot, and glass was scattered across the carpet. My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 while standing frozen in the doorway. I was terrified someone was still inside, but I didn't hear any movement. The police arrived quickly, 2 officers who swept the apartment to make sure it was clear. Nothing was stolen, no missing electronics, no rifled drawers, just a broken window. They took photos, asked if I had any enemies, and I mentioned Sally, explaining her obsessive messages and how she'd known too much about my life. They noted it down but said without evidence, it was hard to pin it on her. They suggested I get the window fixed and consider a security camera, then left me with a case number. I called my landlord, who arranged for an emergency repair the next day, and stayed at a friend's place that night, too shaken to sleep in my apartment. I also told my supervisor, who was alarmed and promised to escalate it with the agency. The next day, I went back to clean up the glass and wait for the repair crew. That's when I noticed something chilling, a crumpled piece of paper near the window, half hidden under the couch. It was a handwritten note scrawled in messy ink. I just wanted to see you. Why won't you talk to me? Yes. My stomach dropped. I bagged the note and called the police again, who took it as evidence and said they'd follow up with Sally, who lived in a neighboring state but was known to visit Jeffrey occasionally. A week later, the police called with an update. They'd interviewed Sally, who admitted to being in town the night of the break-in. She claimed she'd only wanted to talk to me and had thrown a rock through the window in frustration when I wasn't home. But they found more diaries in her car, filled with pages about me, detailing my schedule, my appearance, even fantasies about us being close friends or more. Some entries were darker, describing how she'd hurt me if I kept ignoring her. The police arrested her for vandalism and stalking, and she was held pending a psych evaluation. They also found a restraining order filed against her years ago by another person she'd fixated on, which explained her family's earlier comments about her history. My agency reassigned Jeffrey to another staff member to avoid any conflict, and I took a few days off to process everything. I got a security system installed, cameras, motion lights, the works, and started carrying pepper spray, something many Americans do for personal safety in uncertain situations. Jeffrey's parents reached out, mortified, offering to cover the window repair and apologizing profusely. I appreciated it but couldn't shake the fear. Knowing Sally had been watching me, planning to confront me, and had escalated to breaking into my home was overwhelming. I keep wondering what would have happened if I'd been home that night. The thought of her standing outside my window, rock in hand, still haunts me. I'm trying to move on, but every creak in my apartment makes me jump, and I'm not sure I'll ever feel completely safe again.